I told you to spray this house. The place is infested with birds. Look at this dust. It's an inch thick. You look after me like your mother's dead, Lionel.
When Dead Alive, also known as Braindead, splattered onto screens in 1992, it marked a new frontier in horror filmmaking, one drenched in outrageous gore, twisted humor, and wild imagination. Directed by Peter Jackson long before he became the architect of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, this New Zealand horror comedy became a cult phenomenon for its over-the-top violence and darkly comedic tone. What started as a small, low-budget horror film quickly gained global recognition for pushing the boundaries of what horror could be, blending slapstick absurdity with the kind of blood-soaked spectacle no one had ever seen before. It was the kind of movie that didn't just cross lines, it gleefully obliterated them with a lawnmower. Set in 1950s Wellington, Dead Alive tells the story of Lionel, a mild-mannered young man whose overbearing mother gets bitten by a Sumatran Rat-Monkey, a grotesque creature that carries a deadly and zombifying disease. From that single bite, chaos begins to unfold. Lionel tries desperately to keep his undead mother hidden, but soon the infection spreads through the town, turning everyone into decomposing, flesh-hungry maniacs. What makes the film unforgettable is not just its premise, but its outrageous execution. The gore is excessive, comical, and cartoonish, so much so that the film becomes a strange hybrid of horror and comedy, where the audience laughs even as blood floods the screen. Peter Jackson leaned into the ridiculousness of it all, creating scenes so bizarre and grotesquely inventive that they've become legendary in horror circles. What truly stands out about Dead Alive is its personality. It's not a horror film that tries to be scary in a traditional sense. It's a movie that celebrates the chaos of horror itself. Every frame oozes with creativity, from practical effects to clever camera work. Long before CGI dominated the industry, Jackson and his team crafted their world with latex, prosthetics, and buckets of fake blood, reportedly over 300 liters in the film's climactic lawnmower sequence alone. That moment, where Lionel uses a lawnmower to mow through an army of zombies, remains one of the most gloriously insane scenes in cinema history. It's the kind of scene that defines what Dead Alive is all about: fearless, energetic, and completely unhinged. But beneath the outrageous gore, Dead Alive also has heart. The story between Lionel and Paquita, the sweet and determined young woman who loves him, gives the movie an emotional core amid the chaos. Their romance adds a touch of sincerity, which contrasts sharply with the absurdity around them. Even Lionel's struggle to break free from his domineering mother carries deeper meaning. Peter Jackson uses the horror as a twisted metaphor for control, repression, and the way people try to hide the ugliness in their lives until it inevitably bursts out. It's a movie that knows how ridiculous it is, yet still manages to connect emotionally, even in moments drenched in gore. One of the most remarkable things about Dead Alive is how it showcases Peter Jackson's early genius. Long before Hollywood budgets and digital effects, Jackson was a filmmaker driven purely by imagination and practical ingenuity. He had already gained attention with his earlier cult hits like Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles, but Dead Alive took his craft to a new level. His direction is fast, chaotic, and filled with dynamic camera movements that make even the smallest moments feel alive. Every frame feels like it was made with passion. There's no laziness, no safety, no hesitation. Jackson was pushing himself and his crew to create something wild, and it shows in every sequence. The film became a proving ground for his creativity, a glimpse of the visionary storyteller he would later become. When it was released, Dead Alive faced challenges. Its extreme violence and over-the-top gore meant that censors in several countries either banned it outright or forced heavy cuts. In some places, audiences simply weren't ready for something this insane. But where others saw madness, horror fans saw brilliance. It became an underground sensation, passed around through VHS tapes and word of mouth. In horror communities, it earned instant cult status, with fans praising it as one of the goriest and funniest films ever made. Over the years, it found its place as a cornerstone of splatter cinema, a subgenre defined by its embrace of blood, guts, and absurd humor. The performances in Dead Alive play a huge part in its lasting impact. Timothy Balme delivers a hilariously sympathetic performance as Lionel, a man who keeps trying to do the right thing even as the world collapses into chaos around him. Elizabeth Moody as Lionel's mother, Vera, is both terrifying and darkly funny. Her transformation from controlling matriarch to monstrous zombie is unforgettable. Diana P. Alver's role as Paquita adds warmth and optimism to a movie drenched in red. Together, they ground the insanity with just enough humanity to make the horror hit harder and the comedy land stronger. It's a balance that few horror films achieve, a mix of absurdity, heart, and pure cinematic energy. Technically, the movie is a masterclass in practical effects. Every moment of gore, from melting faces to exploding heads, was done by hand, using creativity instead of computers. The effects team worked tirelessly to make each grotesque detail believable within the film's exaggerated tone. Instead of aiming for realism, they leaned into stylization, giving the film its comic book energy. The blood doesn't just spill, it gushes like a fountain. Limbs don't just fall off, they fly across the room. Every scene feels like a celebration of horror craft, made by people who love the genre and want to push it to its limits. As time went on, Dead Alive evolved from a cult favorite into a cinematic legend. It's often described as one of the goriest movies ever made, but fans know it's much more than that. It's a film that captures the spirit of independent filmmaking, raw, fearless, and unfiltered. It's a reminder that creativity thrives when artists aren't afraid to take risks. Peter Jackson didn't have the resources of a Hollywood studio, but he had imagination, ambition, and a willingness to get his hands dirty, sometimes literally. The result was a movie that no one else could have made, and one that still shocks and entertains decades later. For horror fans, Dead Alive remains a rite of passage, the kind of film you hear whispers about before you finally see it and realize nothing could have prepared you. It's messy, it's insane, and it's utterly unforgettable. From its zombie baby chaos to its outrageous finale, it's a movie that dares to go further than anyone expects. And even though it's drenched in blood, it's filled with humor, heart, and creativity. That combination is what keeps it alive in pop culture, even 30 years later. Few films can balance pure shock value with genuine fun, but Dead Alive does it with style, laughter, and gallons of fake blood. In hindsight, it's incredible to think that the same director who made Dead Alive would go on to win Academy Awards for The Lord of the Rings. But when you watch both, you can see the same passion for world-building, timing, and visual storytelling. Jackson's work on Dead Alive shows his fearless experimentation and his ability to control chaos. Even in the madness, his vision is clear. Every shot serves a purpose. Every moment builds towards something outrageous. It's a film that could have easily fallen apart, but under his direction, it becomes a masterpiece of organized chaos. Over time, Dead Alive has become more than just a horror movie. It's a piece of cinema history. It represents a moment when horror could be wild and fun, when practical effects ruled, and when creativity mattered more than money. It's a movie that refuses to age because its energy is timeless. Every new generation of horror fans discovers it and falls in love with its boldness. It doesn't follow the rules, it makes its own. And that rebellious spirit is what keeps it relevant even decades later. There's also something to be said about how Dead Alive connects to fans emotionally. Despite all the grotesque humor, there's a strange sense of joy in it, a kind of freedom that comes from seeing a movie so unapologetically itself. It doesn't try to fit into a formula. It celebrates the weird, the extreme, and the unexpected. It's that freedom that inspired countless independent filmmakers who saw Dead Alive and realized that passion could outweigh budget. Peter Jackson proved that as long as you have creativity, you can build worlds, whether they're full of zombies or hobbits. Today, Dead Alive is often screened at midnight festivals and horror marathons, still managing to shock and entertain new audiences. The laughter, the gasps, and the disbelief it inspires haven't faded with time. It remains a perfect example of what happens when a filmmaker takes total creative control and refuses to play it safe. For many fans, it's not just a movie, it's an experience. A blood-soaked, hilarious, chaotic experience that defines everything we love about cult horror. Looking back, Dead Alive stands as a love letter to the genre. It's messy, it's bold, and it's alive with creativity. Few films capture that mix of insanity and charm. It's the kind of movie that reminds you why horror is such a powerful form of expression, because even in its darkest, bloodiest moments, it's still about human emotions, fear, love, control, and release. Peter Jackson took all of that and turned it into one of the most outrageous pieces of cinema ever made. And while his later films reached epic heights, Dead Alive remains the film that showed the world what he was truly capable of, blending art, chaos, and madness into something unforgettable. Even after more than 3 decades, Dead Alive continues to live on not as a relic of the past, but as a timeless symbol of fearless filmmaking. It's proof that sometimes the most outrageous ideas make the biggest impact. Whether you're watching it for the first time or the 10th, it still feels wild, funny, and completely unpredictable. And that's what makes it a masterpiece, not despite its insanity, but because of it.